on your end, Jarrett?
Yeah, that's the title slide. So there we go. Perfect. So again, welcome. My name is Jarrett. I also use she, her pronouns. I am thrilled to also be a certified trainer here at Fundraising Academy, but I call myself the nonprofit nerd and I do have my own consulting, the Raven Group. I actually sit in Phoenix, Arizona. I work across the nation. And spoiler alert, if you join us for any of these other webinars, you might see me presenting. So we kind of change the hot seat, if you will. Would love to right now present you Meredith, who is our trainer for today. Meredith is an instructor at National University's Fundraising Academy, and she's also co-host of the Nonprofit Show podcast, which boasts a viewership of over 20,000. She has worked exclusively in the nonprofit industry for 17 years. Meredith is a frontline fundraiser and a consultant. She guides strategic planning, capital campaigns, and leadership development, which is what we're going to hear today. Meredith also serves as the Executive Vice President of Chapter Impact at Blue Star Families and is responsible for overseeing the entire national chapter network, including 13 chapters as well as 24 outposts. That makes me tired just reading your bio, Meredith. It's very impressive. And again, really glad to have you here. So thrilled for all of you to join us. If you would, go ahead and let us know in the chat because we're going to use that function for a couple of community shares where you're joining us from, where you might be sitting. I shared that I am in Phoenix. And Meredith, where are you joining us from?
I am joining from South Florida, Jarrett. I actually just recently moved. I was in Tampa previously. Now I'm in South Florida. So still sunny Florida.
Wonderful. All right. Well, Meredith, I think we are ready to learn from you and hear more about the objectives.
Hey, awesome. Well, welcome everyone. Sorry about those technical difficulties. Let's go ahead and kind of get started here. So here's what we're going to talk about today with professional development. In today's session, we're really focusing on 4 key areas. So we're going to take a look at how continuous professional development directly impacts both fundraising, success, and your career growth. So we're going to talk about how to assess your own strengths and identify growth areas so that you can build a tailored development plan that really works for you. And that's going to look different for everybody. We're going to also cover how to align your professional development goals with your organization's mission and strategic priorities. That's a real key piece here, because when your growth supports the mission, it's much easier to get buy-in from your leadership. Finally, we're going to go ahead and take a look at how to communicate the return on investment of your professional development so that you can make a case for support to sell this, if you will, to your leadership and to your organization, even when budgets are tight. Okay, Jarrett, you want to kick us off with a poll?
Yeah, I would love to. So we are going to launch this poll here right behind. There it is for you. And again, this is a very engaging conversation. So we really want to know how many years of fundraising experience you have. We just like to assess here in the room. We love to know all of the various levels of engagement and development. And again, as we talk about this conversation today, professional development, Meredith can really kind of tailor her information based off the information that you provide us with this right here. So how many years of fundraising experience do you have? And I'm loving the results here. What about you, Meredith?
Yeah, let me see. Let me see if I can. I'm not seeing them on my end. What are you seeing on your end, Jarrett?
So we have 32% right now at less than a year. We've also got 32% between 1 and 3 years. We have no one in between the 4 and 7, which is very interesting to me. And then we jump to the 8 and 10 years. We've got 11%, and then 10 plus 26%. So we are neck and neck with less than 1 and 1 to 3.
It's really kind of interesting, actually, because it's sort of the opposite of what we would expect to see with a bell curve, right? Normally, we expect to see a few folks that are early in their career, a few folks that are really senior in their career, and most folks in the middle. Well, this is kind of a great segue to get us started on the real content for today. So let's talk about the real value of professional development. And we just took a look at the poll to see where everybody is in their career. And one thing that's always really interesting to me about this poll is to see kind of the different spread on how folks are educated, right? Like what got you into fundraising in the first place? And I certainly could share my story. Jarrett, just share with us, how did you kind of stumble into fundraising? Did you go to college specifically for fundraising? Do you have a degree in fundraising, or how did you get into this field?
You really stumbled upon it. So, as a young child, I was very involved in my community. And I think I did maybe the standard, which many of us have done, where we had to raise money for our sports teams, right? Like cheerleading, soccer, those kind of things. I also was a Girl Scout, so I certainly sold those cookies. So if we have any Girl Scout representatives here, would love to know that. So I really started that way. And I did not know, Meredith, that that was really fundraising and training. But fast forward to I did the breast cancer 3-day walk with my mom, and I did it here in Phoenix, Arizona. Part of that challenge is not only that you walk 60 miles in 3 days, but you raise money, right, for your team. So I coerced my mom to walk with me, and she had no problem walking, Meredith, but she did not want to raise the money. And I said, "That's okay, Mom. I got you. I can do both of our goals." I did. This was before I became a professional fundraiser, and I absolutely loved it. And so I realized, even though I was already in the nonprofit world doing communications, I was not necessarily doing fundraising. That really catapulted me into the professional fundraising career that I have today. That's my story, certainly not trained in it by way of school. And it just kind of fell into my lap as something that I really love to do.
Well, I think that your story is probably a lot like a lot of us, right? So what we tend to find in this industry is that most folks do not come into fundraising as a traditional path. So unlike fields like law or accounting, very few fundraisers tend to enter the profession with a degree, being professionally sort of trained in this industry. So most of us come from like communications backgrounds, business, education. Jarrett, like you said, the kind of the bake sale, cheerleading, school fundraiser model, or nonprofit management. So professional development is so important because it's really the training ground for this industry. This is why professional development is so critical in this field. Workshops, conferences, certifications, mentoring really serve as our classrooms for fundraising. Continuous learning is really what shapes our expertise. So the most effective fundraisers that I've come across don't rely solely on their career experience, but they invest in continuous learning. So I think that the data you're seeing on the screen here is really kind of interesting. It indicates that a lot of fundraisers do hold professional degrees, but I would venture to say that a majority of that 78% don't hold degrees specific to fundraising or nonprofit management. The other thing that's really interesting here is that what we tend to see in informal sort of blog activity, and for those of us that read the Chronicle of Philanthropy or Bloomerang or others in this industry, we find that fundraising specific degrees are really quite rare at the bachelor's level. So most formal education in fundraising occurs via certificates, things like master's programs, or really through on-the-job training. So that's the real value of professional development. For most of us in this field, this is how we advance our career. I think the best way to say it is that it serves as our classrooms. All right, so let's go ahead and talk about how fundraising is kind of always evolving. This is another reason that professional development is really, really important. When we look at other fields, like we said, law or accounting, it's a very sort of different education process. What we tend to see in fundraising and in the nonprofit management is that the landscape is constantly shifting. So, digital giving, rising donor expectations, technology adoption, which changes rapidly, mean that strategies that worked even a couple of months ago or a couple of years ago don't really cut it anymore today. When fundraisers invest in your own growth, it has a ripple effect throughout your organization. So stronger skills lead to stronger donor relationships. It leads to higher revenue, more effective teams within your organization. So it's not just personal for you as a fundraiser. It directly advances your organization's mission, and that's a really key piece here. Also, it helps to prevent skill gaps, right? So, like we said, things kind of change very are constantly shifting and changing rapidly. So professional development sort of builds your confidence. It allows you to stay ahead of trends. It allows you to adapt quickly. And so these are kind of all of the reasons why we tend to see a lot of professional development happen in this industry that is very different than the continuous learning that you see in some of our more technical career counterparts. So with that, let's go ahead and take a look at some of the key trends that are impacting fundraising. What is driving change in the world? So first and foremost, we see shifting donor expectations, right? So donors today expect more than just a thank you letter. They want real-time updates. They want transparent reporting on impact. They want engagement that feels personal. If we don't keep up, we're taking the risk of kind of losing their trust and their long-term support. And as most of us know in this industry, donor retention is one of those key metrics that really indicates the health of our organizations. The second thing is a technology adoption. So how technology is advancing. It's no longer optional for us, right? How many of you held out as long as you could on technology? How many of you were like, I'm going to do technology is not my thing. Let me do the bare minimum and I can work email and Google and PowerPoint, but that's about it. What we tend to see now is that in this, day and age, technology is just not optional anymore. So our CRMs, our donor analytics, AI, artificial intelligence is becoming a huge piece of what we do in the workplace now. We see digital giving platforms and they're constantly changing in how we identify prospects, how we connect with donors. So for all of those reasons, this professional development, this continuous learning process ensures that we have the skills to actually use these tools effectively. Philanthropy evolution, right? So we see this all the time is shifting culturally. There's a growing emphasis on things like DEI. Younger generations like millennials and Gen Z, they expect engagement to be mission driven, right? There's a much bigger sort of focus on authentic, transparent communication. They don't want to just give, they want to be a partner in change. And we see that much more with these kind of younger generations. It's less transactional. There's increased competition, certainly, among nonprofits. The landscape is more crowded now than it ever was before. I do a lot of work in nonprofit and in military and veterans nonprofits, right? And I'll be the first one to tell you that they're kind of a dime a dozen. There are so many organizations that share very similar missions, right? They're sort of competing for the same subset of donors. So this idea of continuous learning, professional development, it allows us to sort of stay current. It allows us to take our strategy and our skills to sort of the next level. And that's really what's going to set apart your organization from others that share a similar mission. Okay, let's hear a little bit from our audience here, Jarrett.
Yeah, let's do a community share. Again, as I said, we really enjoy engagement here. So we'd like to know in the chat box, you can use that here, if you would please name one skill that you wish you had more time to develop. So in that previous slide, Meredith listed a few of them, technology being one of them, donor trends, trends changing, one of them. Just let us know what one skill you wish that you had more time to develop. We'd really like to hear from our attendees today. And Meredith, as we wait for that, I remember early in my career, the one skill I knew that I needed to develop was really my individual asking, right? Like the ability to ask individuals face to face for a major gift. So really having the confidence, the skill set, the ability to feel prepared, to feel, again, that confidence level, I think. So for me, that was the one skill that I identified early in my career that I knew I absolutely needed more time to develop. So we're getting some responses in technology, data analysis, and donor asking. Another for technology skills. And then, yes, individual asking, maybe the ask, right? Like really that, as I shared my experience, very similar here.
Yeah.
Tech and AI, fantastic, or planned giving. Shout out next month's webinar. We'll have a little bit of an AI content as well. So we're going to be talking about ethics and AI. So make sure that you join us for that. Someone else has mentioned here, Meredith, that they want to develop the connection/social aspect, that they are a tech nerd. Well, from nerd to nerd, first of all, I honor that, right? And really the ability to connect and have that social aspect. I'll just read these off, Meredith, and then maybe you can talk through a few of them as they resonate. Also, the range of the CRM platform. So this person really wants to understand the range of these platforms as they relate to the industry. Kayla mentions that they oversee annual giving. So between donor relations and appeal writing, they wish that they had more time to learn the data and the gift entry side of things. That's a good one.
Yeah.
We've got a planned giving response and another one for the ask, and also determining capacity for individuals and organizations. And then there's one more that just squeaked in, which if you're still typing, please continue to type. We want to know what they are. So Kara mentioned tips and best practices for navigating office politics and big personalities among board and leadership. It's a soft skill that's hard to develop without experience over time. I think that's very insightful of you. So Meredith, that's what we got from our audience members here. There was a lot of great shares there.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm seeing, kind of a couple of trends almost. So technology. I think a lot of us are feeling like, we are recognizing and feeling this constant sort of pull towards technology. Like I said on the previous slide, we just can't avoid it anymore, right? We realize that it's part of the workplace, it's part of what we do, especially in this industry, because we rely on data so much. That's another sort of trend that I see here in the chat box is folks referencing data, CRMs. One of the things that I always sort of think of with data analysis is, you know, don't numbers and metrics, right? Data is only really as good as the insight you gain from it. Numbers in and of itself don't really tell us much unless we know how to make actionable decisions from that data. It's just raw numbers, right? So yes, I think that all of these are really, really good examples. I think the other thing that's really insightful to me here is that folks are really kind of keyed in on what recognizing what their deficiencies are. And that's a really, really important piece because it's not the same for everyone. It's not the same for every organization. So all that to say, great responses here. Love everything that everybody's sharing with us. And let's talk a little bit about how the skill development translates into better sort of fundraising results. So I'm going to read you the first kind of example here because I know it's kind of small on the screen. So Atlas Free is a nonprofit organization that combats sex trafficking. They implemented a nonprofit CRM with advanced analytics and automation features. This transition allowed them to automate 40% of routine tasks and reduce reporting time by 30%. Those are some pretty significant statistics. As a result, they experienced increased monthly donor retention and improved segmentation for personalized outreach. So in this example, they invested in their staff training on donor analytics tools. So, CRM systems, data segmentation, reporting, which equipped their fundraisers with skills to help them interpret and act on data efficiently. That's sort of what I was saying in that last, was we were talking about the poll. The data in and of itself is just one piece of the skill, right? We have to know how to take insights from that data and make actionable decisions from it. So as fundraisers, when we can develop these skills, we can create targeted, personalized campaigns that improve donor retention and donor engagement. And it's not just about the technology, it's about the knowledge and capability of the team to use it strategically. So I really love this example. I think it's relevant to a lot of us on the call today because we're referencing so much about technology and CRMs and data. The second example here, let me read this one to you. A study by CCS Fundraising highlighted that 92% of college-age individuals are on social media. institutions with structured alumni engagement through platforms like Instagram and LinkedIn saw up to 40% higher donor participation. So tailoring content that resonates with younger audience, such as showcasing alumni student connections, career milestones, etc., provided to be effective in fostering long-term donor relationships. So this one is about more of that donor engagement piece. It's not so much focused on the technology, but it's really focused on social media. So training fundraisers in social media strategy is a really important skill, right? So social media strategy goes so much far beyond just content creation. It's about audience engagement, it's about reading your audience, it's about being able to take it kind of that to that strategic level to allow you to reach younger donors more effectively. So learning that new digital skill is really revenue generating activity, right? So often I think that as fundraisers, we tend to focus on things like major gifts, planned giving, how to make an ask, those very sort of fundraising specific skills. But what we need to really recognize is that things like data analytics is a skill that translates into increased donor retention. Things like social media strategy translates into increased donor engagement. So that's really the how these professional development skills translate into better fundraising results. So I just love those examples because they're rooted in data, and I think that it helps us to kind of to think about what we're pursuing in terms of our continuous learning a little differently. Okay, so let's talk about where to find professional development, right? So, what is professional development? Great news is you're on it today. This is professional development. So, congratulations to everybody for being here. You are investing in yourself, you're investing in your organization. Um, Things like professional association. So, AFP, a lot of us are familiar with that. CASE, the Council for Advancement and Support of Education. Things like local nonprofit networks. I live in South Florida here. We have a great chamber of commerce that has a whole, nonprofit sector to it. They do trainings, they do webinars. There's lots of opportunities for continuous learning in that area. Things like webinars, certifications, asynchronous courses online. All of that is considered, professional development. Fundraising Academy. So Jarrett and I are, here on behalf of Fundraising Academy. We don't just, work with Fundraising Academy, but we really truly live and breathe everything that is offered through Fundraising Academy. There is so many opportunities in our online portal that I, as a fundraiser, go to and use all the time. When Jarrett was sharing my bio earlier, she shared that I work also as a executive vice president with a military nonprofit called Blue Star Families. I oversee a team of fundraisers. There are 35 fundraisers that I oversee, and I use the Fundraising Academy resources all the time to share to my team. There's so many incredible resources on there, and that's professional development. So conferences and workshops, peer mentoring and peer networks are a really good form of professional development. Early in my career, some of the best advice I got was to find yourself like a really good mentor. And so if you haven't done that already, I really encourage you to find folks that are, further more advanced in their career, that have made the silly mistakes before, and they can kind of share their words of wisdom with you. All right, Jarrett, let's hear from the audience again and see what they have to tell us about this one.
Yeah, absolutely. So another community share, we encourage you to use the chat. We want you to think of a time when a lack of training or development affected your fundraising results or your organization's fundraising results at large, right? We want to know what happened and tell us in the chat. So again, there is no wrong answer here. We are just asking for your, genuine experiences and to share that in community, because likely many of us have had the same experience. So we've talked a lot about why continuous learning is truly essential. And so now we want you, and we're asking you to reflect on those real situations where you have moments where you didn't receive sufficient training, you didn't receive sufficient, skill level up. and professional development may have, or the lack of professional development, right, really has affected those results. And as you think of that, and maybe you chat on that, I want to call out Meredith, because I know we had quite a few people mention technology.
Yeah.
I remember when I started my career 20 plus years ago, right? Like really asking my boss through the donor database, like I didn't know what a constituent was. And I remember she's like, "Oh, that's so cute. You're so green." And I was so green. So again, we think of our language, we think of our vernacular that we use so predominantly in this sector. And so for many of our audience today, Meredith, they said, that they were under a year experience or between that 1 to 3 years. If I had not asked that very simple question, I would have gone throughout my career there, right, at this organization, really not knowing what that was, really not knowing how that relates to my role. And again, the database functionality. I also needed a lot of database training to really
Yeah.
understand the standards in which the organization, and I want to call out to Meredith that I see the standards change often from organization to organization as to what is our best practice to utilize the database. And it could be as simple as, how do we enter an
Enter.
address, right? Like, what is
Yeah.
the standard when we enter an address? Are we abbreviating everything? Are we spelling out everything? So again, just some standardizing there. But to have a little bit more training on that, I think is really important. So again, asking our audience members right now to be brave and courageous to think of a time when the lack of training or development affected fundraising results. So we've got some responses here. Um,
These are good ones, Jared. I'm reading through these.
yeah,
Do you want to
good.
read a few out for the group?
Yeah, of course. I started in a position a while ago for our small organization. Hold on, it moved on me. But I started searching for grants and immediately got overwhelmed. Now I'm very grateful to have found us. Well, we are grateful that you're here. As Meredith mentioned, Fundraising Academy at National University is a phenomenal professional development. We have these monthly webinars, there's blogs, there's the online portal. So lots of great information. Someone else submitted that they were promoted to a mid-level, very high performer on the team, but oh, sorry, they promoted a mid-level high performer on the team, but they became overwhelmed and began underperforming. So that person likely needed more leadership and management training to be successful. Absolutely. Another submission here is that they were told to raise funds for a matching grant, but no one on the grant committee has decision-making power. Every time we picked a fundraising option, we were told no. We were expected to basically make money appear out of thin air. Oh gosh, Meredith, have you been there? Because I have.
Yep. Yep.
All right, let's see. Someone submitted here that they believe it is currently impacting them. They have worked in their role and has been provided mostly mentorship, but not these hard skills. Often feel like an imposter. I continue to be a Jill of all trades, none of which I'm an expert. So I feel our fundraising may suffer a bit. I can relate to that as well. And especially in the small to mid-sized shops where I have predominantly worked, Meredith, where there's not a prospect researcher, there's not a major
Yep.
gifts officer. Like there is one development director and maybe a coordinator, a manager, any other title. And it is like all of us are wearing all of these different hats. So there's a lot of that. Ding, ding, ding. I must have hit the nail on the head on that one. Yeah, lots of great answers here. Meredith, are there any others that you want to call out or maybe speak to?
Think these are all so great and they are, like music to my ears. I got to tell you, for everybody in here, like we have been there. Jarrett and I have experienced every single thing that you're describing. I mean, I started my career as sort of like we said in the beginning of the call here, or the beginning of the webinar. So many of us kind of stumbled into this field, right? I didn't grow up saying, I want to be a fundraiser when I grow up. I sort of discovered that I was very good at certain soft skills, right? Like communicating, public speaking, and it was grant writing for me. I started my career as a classroom educator and secured a couple of grants. And then the district had hired me and said, "Why don't you be our official grant writer?" And that sort of snowballed into fundraising. I really like what Lorena had said in the chat here about having, worked in roles that provide, mostly mentorship. So we tend to see that a lot, and I wish it wasn't that way. I think we see in the fundraising industry oftentimes that, our organizations don't necessarily encourage professional development. Like it's kind of rare for me to find an organization that provides a professional development fund, right? That really encourages their staff to seek professional development, provides them stipends to pursue professional development. That's a big piece. The other one that I really appreciated was the comment about leadership and management. So, that is you find somebody who is a really high performer at maybe a mid-level, promote them to a level where they're now in charge of managing a team of fundraisers. And you can really see a direct correlation between what revenue results and, management skills. So all that to say, I think my biggest takeaway here on this one, Jarrett, is that we have a lot of folks here that are very self-aware of where their deficiencies are or what they need to focus on, and I just think it's great that everybody's here kind of pursuing that continuous learning.
Absolutely. And if I may just jump in, Meredith, I
Yeah.
want to again thank all of you for sharing. I know that that can be vulnerable. And again, really just so much appreciation. And as we here at Fundraising Academy, we really encourage you to lean in your community. We are part of your community. We here at Fundraising Academy, Meredith, myself, as well as everyone here in attendance. So again, thank you for sharing. And I hope that you find comfort in seeing what some of your other peers have shared alongside you today, and that you'll take this opportunity to connect and to continue the conversation. And again, another shameless plug, we are here for you, right? We have so many resources that we want to pour into you, and we will share a little bit more of those here at the end. So Meredith, thank you. I just wanted to acknowledge the courage that I think it takes
Yep.
for some of this sharing to happen.
Yeah, this is just great. We appreciate all that. Let's talk about, now that we have sort of established that we recognize what we need professional development in. It's really, really clear to me that folks on the call are like keenly, acutely aware of areas that they need to advance in, right? So a lot of us said technology, data analytics, making the ask or getting comfortable with that, the idea of making the solicitation. Some folks were referencing things like management and leadership, executive presence, etc. So let's kind of transition that to the next step now. So, how do we create a professional development plan? So the first step is knowing yourself. So identify your current skills and your current experience. So, take stock of your strengths in fundraising. Is it donor relations? Is it major gifts? Is it communications? Data analysis? Maybe it's event planning. That's something we see a lot of in the nonprofit industry. So identify your current skills and your current experience. Consider things that are both technical, like data analytics, you know, um, major gifts, things that are like very technical, and also consider soft skills like relationship building, executive presence, leadership, strategic thinking. Those are some of those soft skills that we don't want to overlook. Next thing you want to do is reflect on areas where you want to grow and what are your career aspirations in the long term. Maybe you work primarily right now as a grant writer, but you would like to see yourself more in a major gift officer capacity role. So reflect on areas that you need to grow in, and how those translate to your career aspirations. Which skills do you want to improve or add to your portfolio? Where do you want to see your career go in the next 1 to 3 years? Think about any gaps that you have now that may limit your ability to achieve those goals. The next thing you want to do after that is consider which of those skills have the biggest impact on your fundraising results. So you want to focus your time and your energy on skills that help you to raise more funds, that help you to strengthen donor relationships, or improve your organization's campaign effectiveness. So prioritize those skills that create both personal growth, but also measurable impact for your organization. And that's a key piece here, right? We are, when we pursue and seek professional development, oftentimes we're asking our organizations or our employers to help share in the cost of this professional development. Oftentimes, we're asking them for time away from work so that we can pursue this professional development. So it's really, really important that we are prioritizing skills that create both a personal value for yourself, but also measurable impact for your organization. Last couple ones here, you want to align your growth with your organization's mission and priorities. So what are the organizational needs of your current nonprofit, right? And what skills can you develop to support that? If your organization is thinking about pursuing a capital campaign, possibly in the next couple of years, you might self-reflect and say, I've never done a capital campaign before, but I don't want to be passed over for the opportunity to lead or manage this campaign. So that might be something that you're sort of looking ahead to and saying, this is a skill that I really ought to invest in now. You want to show how your development contributes to those fundraising goals that your organization has. And then the last thing you want to do is prioritize those development areas that advance your personal goals and your organization's goals. So take some time to rank your skill building opportunities by relevance and impact. So which of these are most relevant to your personal goals? Which of these are most relevant to your organization? And which of these create the most impact? You can then take it all, make yourself a nice plan for short-term wins. So keep it focused on 3 to 6 months initially. In the next 3 to 6 months, what is a realistic, attainable kind of goal that you can accomplish? And then on the flip side, for a long-term goal, look ahead for the next 1 to 2 years. So, where do you want to see yourself in 1 to 2 years? What's on the horizon for your organization in the next 1 to 2 years? What skills can you develop that kind of meet that happy medium in the middle, that the overlap between your personal goals and your organization's mission goals? Okay, let's take a look at, I know there's a lot on this next slide here, and I don't want you to get distracted reading all of it, but I want to explain to you what we have here. So one of what you're looking at here are some skill assessment opportunities. There are a number of skill assessment tools out there that allow us as individuals to get some data back on ourselves, right? So what we're seeing here is an example of, there's 6 or 7 of them on here. This chart here is telling us what is the primary focus of these skill assessment tools. What are the sort of key strategies for fundraisers, and which ones have the best uses for the fundraising industry? I'll tell you right off the bat, for fundraising audience, I highly recommend the Clifton Strength assessment. DISC is another one that's really, really good because they really focus on relationship building, communication, and leadership. Those are all essential to donor work. So these are some, again, skill assessment tools that you can take. It'll give you data back on yourself, on your personality, on what your personal strengths are, what your areas for opportunity or growth are. I love to use these tools as a manager with my development team. One of my favorites to use is called the Predictive Index. That one is first on the list here. It helps you to identify workplace behaviors and motivators among your staff. So it'll help you to align fundraisers with roles that fit their natural strengths. These are really great tools to use when you're trying to figure out, where do I see myself in the next 1 to 3 years. Like I said, the Clifton Strengths is it's oftentimes called Strengths Finder, but the Clifton Strengths test is a really good tool that focuses on personal strengths rather than weaknesses. So it's going to give you a lot of data back about yourself, where it tells you are, have a real area of aptitude in public speaking or in communications, things like that. Oftentimes these tests will focus on those soft skills like strategy development, leadership development, things that that sometimes we tend to overlook. So I love this chart here. I think that it has a lot of really useful information. Many of these are free, so you can access them independently when you are sort of self-reflecting and trying to build yourself a professional development plan. The other thing I would encourage you to do is think about implementing this in your organization. There can be a lot of really useful insights that come from understanding the sort of range of skill sets on your team. So who are the folks on your team that are really analytical? They're, you know, those folks, right? The type A personalities. They're black and white, they're highly organized, they're very analytical. And then we also tend to have folks that are really creative, right? They're the creatives. They are not necessarily the most organized folks on the team, but they are really kind of full of innovative ideas. They're big strategic thinkers. There's oftentimes folks on our team that we know are really good at executing at a tactical level. Those are the folks that you want managing your database, right? They do things in a very sort of analytical, methodical process. So taking these tests and implementing them in your organization is a great way to identify those strengths on your team and kind of help allocate your skill sets to areas that folks are most effective at managing.
Meredith,
Jared, have you ever taken any of these?
I wanted to insert, I recently did the disc, and it's not the first time I've done it. Now I can't remember what I did like the very first time I did it. And I love this slide. Kara, and I hope I'm pronouncing your name properly, said this slide is amazing. And I agree. I really appreciate having all of this outlined the way that you have. I've taken many of these throughout my career. And I think for those of you joining us that said, really looking at this from a standpoint of more seasoned in your career. We had several of you say 10 plus years, right? So it might mean that as you move along your career journey, you might see slight changes in these results as you find yourself in a new role and a new position. So I did recently do the disc. I am a DI through and through, right? Like no surprise there. And I'm also seeing, and I'm curious, I'm seeing this take place one at a staff level, like to really
Yeah.
understand broadly how are we operating as a team. But I also see this in the interview process, right? Like really learning more about the person to help make a decision of, is this the right skill set, or are they bringing the expertise that maybe we have a gap on our team? I'm curious if you're seeing that, and if that might be a benefit.
So you are so right, Jarrett. And you know what I love about that is that indicates to me when organizations use these personality tests or these skill tests, it indicates to me that they've already identified a gap in skill sets on their team. So they've already identified that we need somebody who is really good in these three areas. Maybe it's like we said, data analytics, or we really need somebody on our team who's very good at technology, or um CRMs. And what they're identifying is that there's nobody on the team currently that has that skill set. So then what they do is they deploy these personality or skill set assessments to candidates, and it gives them back some insightful information and helps them to kind of narrow down their candidate pool so that they are talking to the right folks that are already sort of predisposed to those skill sets that they're looking for. So I think it's a great tool to use in a recruitment process. So again, if you work, if in your organization, consider sharing this with your HR department. It's a really great tool to use among your teams. And again, a lot of them are free. So if you just want to do it independently at home for your own knowledge, it can provide you with a lot of insight.
Yeah. I love this question we got here. They want to know, would you suggest us doing these with our board members to better understand their strengths?
Oh my goodness, I love that idea. I think that's incredible. Jared, don't you think that could be like a great activity to do at a board retreat?
I do. Yeah. I think that's fantastic. Even as you onboard your board members, I think that would be a great addition to your process, right? Is to include one of these assessments. because your board members should absolutely be part of your fundraising team, right? They should absolutely be helping to make these relationships. So I really do think that that's a phenomenal and insightful question.
You know, Kaylin just said in the chat here, she's a brand new executive director at her organization, and she's walking into an existing board, but doesn't really know much about them. Employing something like this, where provide them with like a skills of personality assessment, could be really a great way to get some insight on these folks. The only thing I'll caution you on is, to take it with a grain of salt, right? It's not going to give you a full comprehensive assessment of somebody's personality and their strengths and weaknesses. It's going to give you snapshots. So don't use this in place of developing those relationships or spending time with your board, because that's still a critical piece that will give you, a much more well-rounded picture or view of who's on your board and what, how you can partner with them best. But it's a great tool to use.
Yeah, great tool.
Okay, all right, let's talk next about professional development plan. So we talked a little bit about the process you go through when you create a professional development plan. And what I wanted to share with you here is kind of like an example of what this might look like. The format is less relevant, right? You could do this in any format you want. You could type it out in a Word document. You could put it in a fillable PDF. You could create a template for your team. But what's really important here is the different sort of sections of information you include. So the goal area. The goal area is where you are identifying the skill or competency that you want to develop. So, for example, major gifts, digital fundraising, donor analytics, social media strategy, leadership, strategic thinking. Those would all be examples of the goal area. It's the area that you've identified as the skill or competency that you're looking to develop. The next one is the specific goal. So make it really, really clear what success looks like. So, for example, secure 2 new major gifts over $10,000. That would be a very specific, measurable goal, right? So you're going to take the overarching broad example, broad goal area of major gifts, maybe, then kind of narrow that down to a specific goal. I want to secure 2 gifts over $10,000. The next one is your action steps. So how are you going to get there? How do you get from A to B? Outline concrete steps that you can take to achieve that goal. So training, mentorship, certification, completing a graduate level certificate. Those are actionable steps that are going to help you get from point A to point B. The next one is resources and training. This is where you are going to identify courses, workshops, books, mentors, individual resources that you need to use or have at your disposal to help you sort of gain the knowledge or the competency that you're pursuing. The next one is going to be your timeline. So it has to be a realistic, time-bound goal. So that means realistic deadlines for each step. If you say that you want to secure 2 major gifts over $10,000, you have to give that a timeline. I think that, I think it was, and don't quote me on this, but I want to say I read an article recently. It was a quote by, I think, Elon Musk, and he said, if you give yourself 30 days to clean a room, it's going to take you 30 days to do it, right? So that's the importance of the time piece. You want to give yourself a realistic timeline, but don't make it indefinite. If you make it indefinite, it'll be really hard for you to accomplish that goal. So in this example, we put 3 to 6 months. The next one is your success metric. So define how you're measuring that achievement. Is it quantitative or qualitative? In the example of securing 2 major gifts over $10,000, that's very quantitative, right? It's very easy for us to determine if we met our goal. You either secured the gifts or you did not. But think about something that's a little more abstract, like strategic thinking. Think about something like leadership skills. Those are abstract ideas. How are you going to define whether you, accomplished or met your goal or not? So a couple things that are tips for success when you're creating your professional development plan. Focus on 2 to 4 high impact goals over a 6 to 12 month period. That'll be really impactful for you. So come up with 2 to 4 that are realistic and attainable over a 6 to 12 month timeline. Ensure alignment again between your personal goals and your organization's priorities. This is, I think, the third time we've stressed this. This one's really, really important. Lastly, kind of revisit and update your plan regularly. So professional development is ongoing. It doesn't, start and end on a linear timeline. It evolves, it adapts, it develops over time. Any thoughts, Jarrett, for you as you take a look at it like the example like this?
I think this is fantastic. And I think for those of you that supervise people, again, like not just create this plan for you, but really empower your staff to do the same for them. I go into this world and into this career so much so that is also my responsibility to develop the next leaders, right? To take on this role, succession planning 101. So really looking at it to say, yes, where is it that I want to be, but also how can I help those on my team and maybe those on my in my community. They might not be in my team specifically, but they are in my community. And again, just helping everyone within the sector. So I think that's fantastic. And as we look at that, I think we have a poll next, Meredith, and we
Yeah.
want all of you to start thinking about your own professional development plan. So on this poll, we want you to identify which area of fundraising would you most like to strengthen this year. So we're going to get you fast tracked onto creating your own plan. We've got options here: major gifts, donor stewardship, digital and social media fundraising, data analysis, as well as donor segmentation, leadership and team management, grant writing, and reporting. So you can only identify one in this poll, but the good news is in your plan, you can certainly identify more than one. So we're getting some great results here, and predominantly, well, there's still some responses coming in, but the one with the most, oh, it's changing. This is the live results, right, Meredith? So that's what we're seeing here. But okay, the largest response we're seeing is data analysis and donor segmentation.
Okay. Yep. Okay. I'm just seeing the results on my screen now. You're right. That's the biggest.
Great.
36% are telling us data analysis and donor segmentation, which kind of goes back to that concept of CRMs and technology, right?
And then the second one being the major gifts and stewardship.
Yep. These are really good. And like Jarrett said, I think this kind of helps you for this purposes of this poll. You can only select one, but as you're crafting your personal professional development plan, I mean, you can identify several of these. Remember the guidance here. So focus on 2 to 4 high impact goals that are realistic and attainable over a 6 to 12 month period. So that kind of gets you fast tracked on your identifying your areas of focus.
Yeah. And thanks, everyone. We love the engagement.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So let's talk about now that you've identified where your deficiencies are, what competencies or skills you're looking to develop. You have a pretty good, you're confident in, what resources and tools you need to pursue. You're starting to get an idea of how much it's going to cost you, both in your time and your resources. Now let's talk about how you advocate for yourself. How do you get partnership and buy-in from your organization to help support you in your professional development journey? So, the number one, and you have to invest in yourself, right, to benefit the mission of your organization. So, professional development isn't just about you as a fundraiser, it's about increasing your impact on the organization that you're working with. So investing in yourself certainly strengthens your skills, but it helps you to also engage donors more effectively. It improves campaign results for your organization. It improves the bottom line of the profit and loss sheet, right? So, for example, a fundraiser who learns that donor analytics can identify, um, you know, major gift prospects, right? So donor analytics can help you identify major gift prospects, which leads to an increase in revenue for your programs. So you can't you can't, as an organization, you can't deliver your programs and services without funds to support it. So it's all sort of related. I know that there's often common barriers that exist. So there's budget constraints that the organizations we work with Many of us work with smaller nonprofits, right? I'll give you an example. My whole career, I worked with mostly small nonprofits with 10 employees or less. Like Jarrett described earlier on in the webinar, a lot of times it's not uncommon in the nonprofit industry to find a development shop that has like one or two members, right? Then I sort of started transitioning myself into these larger nonprofits where we have big teams of people. So right now, I have 35 fundraisers that work on my team. So it was a big transition for me to go from the small one man, me, myself, and I model to a really large team where you have to work effectively with collaborating, interdepartmental, collaboration and facilitation. Leadership and management skills became very relevant. So there's oftentimes barriers that exist, like budget constraints. If you're at a nonprofit that works on a shoestring budget, there might be limited time available. If you're working with one of those organizations where you are the major gift officer, the grant writer, the executive director, the chief inspiration officer, it's all you. And so there's limited time. You also need to get leadership buy-in from your board. So all of these sort of barriers that you're identifying can be overcome, but you have to be able to propose it in a way that you are advocating for yourself. You might be proposing things like online trainings, short workshops, mentorship opportunities, but the key is to frame the growth for yourself personally as mission critical. So, for instance, you could say something like, improving my major gift skills, I can help secure larger donations for our programs and secure more donors or more clients for our organization. That would be an example of how you're sort of framing it as mission critical. There's an example here on the screen. By learning data analytics, I can identify donor trends and increase revenue to support our programs. It reframes development from being a personal perk to being something that's a more strategic investment for your organization. So that's the first step in advocating for yourself is helping to really think through how it benefits you, but how it benefits the organization. Let's go to the next one and talk a little bit about communicating the ROI to your team. So when you advocate for professional development, you have to focus on measurable outcomes. The leadership responds to impact, right? I think a lot of us know that. Those of us that are in leadership roles know that, the impact is the bottom line. So you need to highlight ways that your training can increase donation, improve donor retention, enhance team efficiency. These are the things that communicate an ROI to your leadership. For example, if you learn how to better segment your donor base, you might be able to improve retention by only 5%. So on a $500,000 donor file, that's an additional $25,000 in retained gifts every year. So there's a clear return on investment. So for this one here, what we want you to do is to really think about metrics, data, facts, right? The same logic kind of applies across the board. So professional development can increase donations. It can strengthen donor retention. It can improve team efficiency. It can ensure that you're aligned on strategic goals with your board. So the more you can show those measurable outcomes, the easier it is to secure support for ongoing personal growth or professional development. You're seeing that example that I just read there on the bottom of the screen, but I would encourage you to go through the exercise of quantifying the impact, right? So what is the return on investment to your organization? If you can't define that clearly, then you probably need to rethink what you're pursuing in terms of your professional development. It has to be relevant to your impact or to your mission. Okay, next one. Let's talk through, this is the third one about advocating for yourself. Let's talk about language tips for leadership and boards. So how do you communicate this to your board? When you're speaking with your leaders, or maybe it's your executive director, depending on where you are in the organization. When you're speaking with your leaders, you want to emphasize outcomes, not activities, right? So keep it strategic, not tactical. To keep the conversation centered on organization benefit. sample language you could use. You could say something like, this training will help me build relationships that result in larger gifts. You could say something like, developing this skill will increase donor retention by 10%. That's measurable and attainable. You could say something like, investing in staff growth will strengthen our team and our fundraising results. So notice that each of these statements sort of connects your personal development to a very tangible organizational outcome. That's the real important piece here about how you communicate with your board. There is a fundraiser that I once coached, and she wanted to attend a data analytics workshop. Her board chair was kind of skeptical because he was really more focused on things like those soft skills, like leadership development or donor relationships. And I remember this board chair, he kept saying over and over again, fundraising is all about relationships. So the only thing he was really kind of focused on was that relationship building skill. She wanted to attend this data analytics workshop, and he sort of felt like that was a function of finance. It's not a good investment for you as a fundraiser. And so we had to help her kind of frame, how will this actually help the organization raise money? So she framed the ROI really, really clearly. She said, if I can learn to better segment our donor base, I can improve retention by 5%. And that was able to help him to sort of see a tangible, quantifiable ROI here. So she noted that better use of data would save team hours every month. So there's personnel costs in reporting. It would free up more time for donor calls, which is that donor relationship piece that he was so focused on. So in other words, the trainer would not only increase revenue, but it would make the whole team more efficient. So when you're talking with your leadership and your board, you want to really emphasize the outcome, not the activity of what you're pursuing. Okay, let's take a look at, this is another kind of chart here that illustrates how professional development isn't just about personal growth. It kind of fuels your organization's success. So this one helps you if anybody is sitting here kind of thinking through what it is you want to pursue, or how to communicate that impact or that ROI to your organization or your leadership. Consider something like this. This sort of helps to translate your skill to the organizational impact. If you want to focus on donor stewardship, you need to frame it in a way that it really increases donor lifetime value, right? So that's a tangible benefit to the organization. Leadership and management is a big skill that translates to stronger team performance. Leadership skills and developing leadership skills may seem like an internal goal or growth opportunity, but it has a ripple effect throughout the whole organization. Digital fundraising, that translates to expanded online giving. So investing in digital fundraising allows you to tap into broader audiences, right? So you can learn how to run effective email campaigns from that, how to optimize online giving. It can expand your donor pool and increase your revenue streams. Those are very tangible results. Major gift strategy, that translates to increased major gift revenue, which of course is one of the highest ROIs that we tend to talk about in the fundraising industry. Data analytics, we heard a lot about today. A lot of folks are looking for that. The translation there, the benefit to your organization is improved donor retention. So professional development in data analytics helps you move from guessing to knowing. So by analyzing giving patterns, you can spot donors that are at risk of lapsing before they get to the point of lapsing. You can take proactive steps to retain them. It can improve your stability in your fundraising results. These are the ways you want to frame it when you're talking to your leadership. Jarrett, any thoughts here on this? Like, as I'm just reviewing some of the comments in the chat that we heard earlier.
Yeah.
Any thoughts from you on like, how can we help folks to frame their personal goals in organizational impact?
I really appreciate this. And I want to ask a question that has not been asked by the audience yet, but I see this, and I'm sure you do too, Meredith, is that in times that are hard with resources, right? Often professional development is the line item that gets reduced or completely cut. And so I love what you've provided by way of creating a plan. How do we create the ROI on this? How do we advocate for this? Could you talk to us, a little further about how we can ensure that these PD, professional development dollars, remain in our budget so that we can, right, continue to develop ourselves in these ways and these skill sets?
That is an excellent question because it's one of those things that's kind of like out of our control initially, right? So,
Yeah.
first and foremost, if you're in a leadership role, what's really interesting here is back on our very first poll, we saw that there's kind of an inverse bell curve. We've got folks that are kind of early in their career, but we had a lot of folks that are more senior. So, presumably at 10 plus years in the industry, you're in a leadership role, oftentimes in your organization. That means that you have influence over the budget. So you have to advocate for with your development committee or with your finance committee, with your budget committee, with your CFO. You have to be able to advocate for professional development by, again, sort of connecting the ROI to tangible results. So that's a big piece. You are in a position of authority at that level in the organization, and you have a level of responsibility to ensure that you are allocating dollars for professional development. Now, what happens if you come in and you're relatively new in your career? You really aren't in a position of authority. You don't have the ability necessarily to influence the budget. I think that's where we have to really rely on our skill sets as cause selling advocates. So we are constantly selling, right? Everything we do, we're selling ideas, we're selling opinions, we're selling services or programs, we're selling our mission. So that's where we have to really kind of rely on our ability to communicate effectively to those folks in the organization that have that authority. And I think it really goes back to what we saw on those last couple of slides there, which is being able to articulate the impact to the organization. That's a real key piece there.
Yeah.
The other thing I would suggest is if you're facing pushback and you're hearing from your leadership that we just don't have the budget this year to do this, we didn't allocate dollars for professional development, consider offering to split the cost or cost share in the cost with your organization. That can be something that's really effective because it really demonstrates that you have some skin in the game. You're not asking your board or your organization to come in and fully fund your certificate program. What you might say to them is, I have a real opportunity here that's going to have a tangible impact on the organization. I'd like to split the cost with you if that's something that you would consider. And oftentimes, I think that organizations are really receptive to that.
Yeah, I would agree. And I appreciate you off the cuff, right, answering that because I am seeing and hearing that all too often, which just breaks my heart. And we, of course, had an audience member say, that's kind of backwards, isn't it? That professional development helps us get organizations out of these difficult places. Yes, absolutely. And sadly, I see it all too often. Again, shameless plug. The great news is there are so many wonderful professional development that is also at no cost, like today's webinar. So when there are opportunities for those no cost engagements, I highly, suggest that you take advantage of them as you are today. And yes, there are absolutely things like the CFRE, right? That it costs. That is absolutely something that will need to include some kind of investment. So I love the tips you've provided here, Meredith, the plan, taking it back to the ROI, and then also, asking for that cost share. So lots of great insights today.
Right. Well, let's go ahead and kind of review all the things we went through today. So, we started with continuous learning, right? So, continuous learning is the classroom for the fundraising industry, right? This is so many of us learn from on the job experience. It fuels both stronger donor outcomes and it advances your career personally. Self-assessment matters. So that slide that we took a look at where you can do skills assessments, personality assessments, it helps you to identify your strengths. It helps you to identify growth areas or weaknesses that you might have, and it will help you to create a personalized development roadmap that is going to be really critical in identifying, time-bound specific goals. We talked about strategic alignment a couple of times. Remember, it has to be strategically aligned with your organization's mission. So think, if you don't understand where the organization wants to see itself in 1 to 2 years or 3 to 5 years, it's going to be hard for you to sell this to your organization on a cost share basis, right? So you want to first understand what their goals are and make sure that you're aligning with those. And then the last one is that ROI piece. So this is one of those fundraising skills, right? Being able to sell our ideas, sell our requests to other people. So you have to be able to frame your professional development as a high return investment. Oftentimes as fundraisers, we do this with our donors. We are framing the gift ask as an investment, right? I told you do a lot of work with military and veterans nonprofits. And so many times when I'm talking to donors, I like to frame it as an investment in national security. So in the same kind of vein, you want to think about how you are selling the ROI to your leadership to advocate for yourself. So that's sort of a brief synopsis of all the things we covered today. Jarrett, do we have time to open the floor to any questions that our folks might have?
Yes, we do. We do have some time, so please make sure you use the chat box. We also have the Q&A open and active, so if you'd like to ask us a question there as opposed to more publicly in the chat box, either way would be fine. We do have a question that came in the Q&A, Meredith, so I'll read it aloud. How do you incorporate fundraising into Run and Walk to raise money for your cause? Are you simply targeting new markets to increase your visibility rather than persistently pursuing the same donors? So this is a little outside of today's context, but we do have a question asking about incorporating fundraising into what seems to be maybe a run or walk opportunity, like a fundraiser, Meredith. Wanting to know, are we targeting a new audience to increase our visibility? I'm assuming brand awareness, recognition, rather than constantly asking the same donors. So again, a little out of today's context, but hey, while we wait for those other questions, we can do this hotspot coaching.
Yeah. So if I'm reading the question correctly, like Jarrett said, the way I'm interpreting that is, how do you incorporate fundraising into things like peer-to-peer, like a 5K walk or run, right? So are you simply targeting new markets to increase your visibility, or pursuing, the same donors that are already in your database? One of my very favorite things about the peer-to-peer model and about those 5K walks and runs is that it is a really great way to recruit new donors. So you want to go to your current donor pool, your current donors that are already familiar with your organization, that are already engaged with you. You want to go to your current donors and invite them to participate in your walk or run, but their sort of objective or goal is to develop teams, right? Is to bring in all of those their friends, family, neighbor, grandma, grandpa across the country. So that's how you kind of build that. So if I'm reading that correctly, that's how I would answer that one, Jarrett. I don't know if you have another sort of idea on that one.
You know, what I love about these community events, Meredith, is that I think first and foremost, we absolutely do attract the audience that already has our attention and we have their attention, right? Like they're part of our constituent base. I'm using that word because I learned it forever ago, early in my career, when I was like, what is a constituent? So we're really tapping into our current audience, and we're also inviting them to bring in other friends, family members, neighbors, community champions, right? So for these community events like a run or a walk, I think that is a great time to extend the invitation for your current audience to bring in additional attendees. And that is therefore their entry point into the organization. And then you get to start this beautiful donor journey with them. So yeah, it's a great opportunity. Here is a question. Okay, well, we're getting out of our topic, Meredith, but here's a question that I'll throw out as well. What are low lift fundraising ideas that can make you money without burning out yourself or your staff? And I will again toss out that peer-to-peer because I think that's a great opportunity for us to lean into our board members. If we have any advisory council members, if we have a young donor group, which is not typically the external name that we use for those, but anytime we have like an engaged group, that is a wonderful opportunity to engage that peer-to-peer fundraising campaign. So
A great one, Jarrett. The only thing I would add to that is that I would strongly encourage you um, to think of your board seats like gold, right? So filling your board, whether it's a governing board or an advisory board or a development committee with people that are highly engaged and active, they become capacity builders for you, right? So they are there to create capacity for you and your staff. They are there to be thought partners. They are there to open doors and facilitate introductions in the community. I go to my board and I ask every board member for a list of names of prospects on a quarterly basis. So every board member is giving me a list of 2 to 3 names every quarter. And that's where I, get my pipeline from, right? And so that's I would encourage you to try to think strategically. How do you work smarter, not harder, right? You should be having your board provide you with names, have your board partner with you to introduce yourself to these folks, to facilitate introductions. It's a great way to have them sort of take some of that burden off your shoulders.
yeah, absolutely. Great questions as it relates to fundraising. We want to thank all of you for participating in these questions and the conversations, the polls, the community share. Incredible questions. And again, I appreciate your courage or vulnerability in the community shares. A reminder that all of you for registering today will absolutely receive a link that access the slide deck. So you will get that beautiful slide that a few of you mentioned you really liked that Meredith provided today on the DISC assessment and those personality tests, as well as some of these other ROI charts, if you will, the worksheets to help you advocate for professional development. So you will get access not only to the slide deck, but also to this recording in a follow-up email here in just a few days. We also want to encourage you to connect with us. So this next slide will have 2 QR codes that you can scan, actually 3, my apologies. You can scan the QR and connect with Meredith. I believe that takes us to our LinkedIn pages, as well as to myself. And then we encourage you to join our email list. So maybe you're already on it because you got today's notice, but we do encourage you to stay on our email list so that you can continue your professional development journey along with us here. Again, many of our opportunities are no cost, like this webinar. And we also, on the next slide, want to share with you the QR code for our no cost online learning portal. This is something, as Meredith said, she accesses already and, in her day-to-day. I do as well. I just accessed a blog that Meredith, you wrote recently for Fundraising Academy. So filled with wonderful tools and resources. I also want to tell you, this is accessible not just to you, but anyone on your team, your organization, your board members, your volunteers. So bring them along in this Fundraising Academy journey right with you. So the more that we can educate along this journey, the more that we have here helping us to support our critical missions and our community at large. But wait, there's more. We also want to tell you about the Fundraising Essential Certificate. So this slide that we're going to show another QR because we are loving QRs now. But the Fundraising Essential Certificate, as you can see on the slide here, if you're interested, scan it. I would encourage you to scan it, even if you're not sure you're interested, because I want to do a call out. Several of you earlier in today's conversation, you mentioned that you wanted additional support in making the ask. And I want to call this out specifically because we have more information in this certificate. We have a course on making the ask, and we invite you to check that out. So go ahead and check that out. It is 125 hour. It is flexible because if anyone knows that you're busy, we know that you're busy. We know that you have a lot on your plate and that you're juggling quite a bit. So this is flexible. It has a modular certificate. to help all of you as those busy fundraisers to meet your professional development goals. Again, today's conversation is just scratching the surface. We want to help you to continue to do this. So certificates are available individually, are also in bulk. So if you're interested in doing this with a team, again, like bring your whole team along for this journey. Their certificate is available to be purchased again in bundles, but also individually. So we encourage you to check that out as well. Meredith, anything else before we say thank you? And again, just appreciate everyone's time for today's discussion.
No, I think we had a really great group today. I really appreciate all the participation and the thoughts and the questions and the engagement you guys put in the chat. It makes for a really engaging, productive webinar. Like Jarrett said, reach out to us on LinkedIn. We're happy to answer any other questions you have and hope to see you involved in some more of this incredible professional development opportunities offered through Fundraising Academy.
Yeah. And Meredith, before we go, I do want to recognize that we had someone with their hand raised. So if you want to unmute yourself and Martha, thank you. If you want to go ahead and unmute yourself, Meredith and I would welcome to hear what you have to share.
I think about it. Because did you tell them I still have that stuff in last year?
Are you there? Oh, we might have lost you.
We lost her. Okay.
All right. And there's one more question here before we sign off. Someone mentions that they've heard that taking the personality and the strengths test don't need to be taken more than once. What are your thoughts on that?
That is a great question, and I have an answer for you because I actually just looked into this myself. I think it depends on the personality assessment. So I would encourage you first and foremost to reach out to the administrators of that. So for example, if it's the DISC, reach out to DISC. If it's predictive index, reach out to predictive index. They can answer those. But what I can tell you that I've heard, because I just looked into this, if you've taken the assessment recently within the last 2 years, you shouldn't take it again. You should really, it's a good idea to take it again when there's been like a substantial life change. So if you've moved or swapped careers or swapped industries, maybe you got married and have kids, those types of things can have a tendency to really change the way you think about and perceive the world. If there's been no substantial change in your life, just maybe you advanced in your career or you took another job in the same industry, then you want to keep the same assessment. But again, if there's been some kind of substantial change or event in your life that has the ability to really shape the way you perceive the world in a different way, then you should take the assessment again.
I'm so glad you recently looked into that, Meredith.
Yeah, you know why, Jarrett? Because I'm doing a retreat with my whole development team, and we're going to do a whole bunch of professional development. And we went through this we're going to do the predictive index there. And so we went ahead and asked them, and they said that was the guidance they gave. So I'm happy to pass on the words of wisdom.
Well, perfect. Well, thank you again for everyone to join us. Please do continue to lean into us. Meredith and I and the whole team here at Fundraising Academy will continue to pour into you to support you. So connect with us, join us on additional webinars, check out the portal, check out their certificate, all great things. And don't forget to advocate for yourself and your own professional development. Meredith, great job. And thanks to all of you for joining us. Have a fantastic rest of your day.